Why is conversation important?
Good question. I feel like conversation is important because everything stems from a conversation, and essentially everything you see around you, whether that's like the buildings which have been made, whether that's the phone you're using, whether that's the relationship your parents have had, it all starts with conversation. And there's an idea which says that the level of conversation dictates the level of collaboration. And I feel like a lot of the time, as humans, we create these frames for how reality is, right? And this is really based on our own perceptions or our own viewpoints on the world. And this develops over time. This could be because of the community you grew up in, and then the experience you've had throughout school and what you were taught and what society inputted into your mind. And, society's not wrong. Society's there because, we need to exist and we need to work together as a civilization. Otherwise we'll just be crazy, like kill each other and have sex with each other, which is, not really ideal to function as a society. But I feel like where we create these frames for how reality is based on our different experiences, we faction off into different ideologies or different political temperaments or different viewpoints on the world. And I think it really stops us from having middle grounded conversation, where you may be from a lower class, working class background, where someone from the upper class, he kind of has this intellectual superiority, which is clearly obvious. I don't think there's no denial of that, hence why they're, in general, they're not everyone, because you could be born into it. I think there's that as well. But I feel like if you worked your way up to it, you'll tend to know a lot more and you'll tend to know how to execute a lot more. But I feel like there's also this moral superiority, which comes as a result of success, which doesn't allow you to communicate from the in the dominance hierarchies, layers below you, which is quite a controversial idea, you may say. But I feel like, especially in politics, I think this is the big problem. In politics, it's I'm left, you're right. When there's issues we should be focusing on, there's things we should focus on, big macro problems. And it's about, all right, now put down your because a lot of the differences are very trivial. It's you're against abortion, I'm for it. I'm for these type of people. But really, we're all working towards similar things. I think it deviates slightly. But to go back to the question, conversation is important because without it, and without a middle grounded conversation where you listen to understand someone, and then with that understanding, you then work together. When you all listen to understand and you all focus on actually getting a good result, a fair result out of conversation, I think conversation leads to a lot of collaboration very quickly. Whereas I feel like if you just conversate for the sake of, this is my viewpoint and you must listen to me and you're not right and I'm right and I'm a social justice warrior or I'm a right-wing conservative and I will not listen to you because I know what's right and it's practical, I feel like, oh gosh, you missed the point. And I feel like to have good conversation, you should have goals around what the conversation should actually achieve. And I feel like maybe, I'm not entirely sure on this, but my intuition, and I'm going to do some research into this, I'm going to find out, I'm going to bring you guys some awesome value for this. I feel like in politics, they don't focus enough on what should actually be done and then focus conversation around that and then listen to understand each other. Rather it's, we know what has to be done, but I'm going to find my viewpoint first. And your viewpoint's wrong, regardless, most times. I don't know. That's kind of my first off opinion. And I feel like this trickles down on micro layers as well, whether that be a relationship. If I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to prove I'm right throughout the whole relationship, you're going to find yourself in divorce really soon. I think that's a funny idea. You have a friend, right? I'm friends with you, and I don't listen to you and I think I'm right and I think you're wrong and I can't learn anything from you, then we can't grow as people. So I think conversation is important because I think it's a fundamental nature of reality, and I think good conversation and good listening leads to good long-term results because everything's interpersonal and everything's because of someone else.
Okay, so part of the problem that you've just kind of outlined here is that there are superficial characteristics that make it difficult for people to talk to people on a relatable level because they see, oh, this person is right, oh, this person is different to me, and so they see these subtle differences. So what do you think we can do to break down those subtle differences and actually sit down and have a real kind of heart-to-heart conversation with each other? What do you think is the strongest step we can take with that to try and achieve that?
The strongest step I think we can take, well, there's two really strong steps. I think the strongest step we could probably take is actually building an organisation which focuses on it, right? I think that's the first and foremost thing, right? Because I feel like the reason there is a lot of differences between people is because society is structured in a way where you move up the social rankings in society. And our society in West is based around capitalism, which I'm not completely against. I actually think capitalism is quite good. I think it has its pros and has its cons, like all things. But I feel like it's about building something which understands capitalism, which can then focus as an institution which focuses on people. But then it's about encouraging people to actually get down and do it and have conversation. And I feel like, you know what, scrap that point. I think more than anything, it's about changing the individual minds and about people becoming a lot more open-minded and conscious of who they are. You know, like, I feel like there's a true nature, there's a true being, which goes beyond your superficial status, but it's about sharing consciousness and wisdom. And I feel like it's about enough people doing that and enough people getting behind it. Like, I may not be a guru or a sage, right? Nowhere near it. But I'm sharing what I know to the best degree I can at this moment. And the more podcasts I make and the more I go on, the more, ideally, well, I'm hoping so, the more value I can provide and new insights and new ways of thinking. But I feel like it's about people learning. I think that's probably the most important thing. I feel like if you think you're too good to learn, then you just stagnate with what you already know. You know, was it Aristotle or maybe Marcus Aurelius? He's like, Greek philosopher, said, "All I know is I know nothing." Yeah, Google it. Yeah, you'll probably find out. But I mean, I think it's such a good way to live life, you know. And I feel like it's about understanding you can learn something from someone else. And like, even if it may not be good or bad, maybe they might say 90% things which you find irrelevant, but then 10% of it could be really good. And actually be like, oh, right. Now I can change how I am, how I be in this world slightly based off what that person told me. And I could go and focus on the world in a different way, you know. So I feel like it's all about the individual psyche. And then ideally something which focuses on actually bringing people together, you know, which will be the next step. But I think the individual psyche begins with it. And people sharing the message, people being proactive to share the message.
Okay, so you mentioned right at the beginning that you wanted to set up an organization that
You bet.
would do that.
Well, not just do that, but yeah, carry on. Sorry, finish your question.
But so why, like, organizations and institutions can generally lead to people becoming lost in them because they're so impersonal and they don't really have like a personal relationship with the people there. Like, how do you stop that kind of thing from happening?
That's a very good question. And I feel like a lot of the reasons why organizations tend to forget about the people in it is because they, one, don't have good leadership. They don't have company values where they focus on the people. But more importantly than anything, I feel like, you know, if you're a company like McDonald's, right, your corporate hierarchy and the structure of your corporation is so big that the people at the top will get nowhere near the people at the bottom. You know, there's just such a big gap, it's just not possible to reach them. And I feel like, for me, it's not like I'm trying to build a company or an organization, although it will be a company, but more of it, I think of it as a community. And I feel like there can be systems in place which hold events. There could be like things where people can get on down and see what we do. They can like engage with us on a personal level. And I think it's important to just have systems in place which hold up values, which care about people. And like, I don't see it as a company. Like, I'm not trying to sell you anything, you know? Like, I'm trying to actually improve current situations and working within the community to make it happen. So I see it more as like a collaborative community rather than a company where there's employees. That's where I see it going. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I want people who like what they do, you know, and want to make change. And like, if you do that instantly, you'll fit into the culture. Ideally, in my vision. It's very visionary. I say this like it's just a podcast at the moment. It's like my second podcast. But you know, you gotta have the vision. You gotta be a bit crazy. But I feel like it's all about like getting people who enjoy what they do, and then getting people to have a collaborative state of mind rather than a competitive one. So I feel like a lot of corporate structures, and this might go off the point slightly, but I feel like a lot of corporate structures and corporations, it's really based around competition. It's like, who can provide the most value, which usually is the most competent person, but then it's like, how can I beat you to get to the top? And it's like so much like we're competing against each other rather than working with each other to actually do certain things, you know? And like, obviously, everyone wants to be number one. You know, I want to be number one in whatever I do, and not from like. I think you got to have that kind of ambition. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like it shouldn't be at the detriment of others. And I feel like you could build stuff on good rather than, you know, bad. Not bad, but like negative attributes of, you know, interpersonal relationships. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So you've just said some kind of contradicting things there.
Right, I tend to do that.
You've
Try to
said
clarify it. Yeah.
you've said to me that you want to cultivate a kind of like a like a cooperative mindset
Mhm.
where you're working together with people.
Sure.
But then you've also then just said to me that you want to still be number one and you still want to kind of strive for that like top place.
Yeah,
So
you're
like
right.
how
How does that make sense?
how do you reconcile
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Because you're
'Cause if
it
I'm
sounds like
yeah,
your mindset is
not in line with what I'm saying, I
not
want to
in
do.
like yeah,
Yeah.
it's not.
What I would say is actually I'd probably go back on my point about me wanting to be number one. What I would actually probably think of it as is I would just want to be a better version of myself. And I'm competing against myself really, and I feel like I'm just trying to self-actualize more. And the more I self-actualize, maybe naturally it leads to like a better position. And maybe like I feel like I'm just trying to self-actualize and be the best version I can be, not necessarily be number one. So yeah, I slipped up. That didn't sound particularly cool, but you know, like I feel like when I'm talking from like the best way I can, I'm gonna naturally make some mistakes. Like something's gonna flop out, which will seem like a contradiction. But to go back to your point, I agree with you. I think being number one at the detriment of others is not a good way of living life. I feel like there's like your career in that, but I feel like more important than that is the development of yourself and your being. And I feel like I just want to be the best possible version of myself for me and the people around me. You know.
So what do you mean by self-actualization?
So like kind of this idea that like you kind of like you may find a better definition of this, so you may want to research this, but from what I know, it's like this idea that you start off in this world as like a kind of pure being, and then what happens is you go into the world, society puts things into you, have ideas, and maybe you develop some types of characteristics, but realistically it's like becoming the most loving, caring, competent, valuable version of myself to others, which people I can actually do good, and also have the best relationship with myself, you know, because I feel like if I can have a really good relationship with myself, naturally I'm going to be good with others. So, I mean, and ideally maybe it's the transcendence of oneself. You know, is there even such thing as I, you know, which is like a completely another thing, and I do not think I'm enough qualified to go into the depths of that, although I could give you a few opinions on it. But that gets really deep, you know, talk about like ego death and like, you know, the idea like if there's like psychedelics like 5-MeO, DMT and DMT, which are like super crazy for that, which I've never done, but, you know, I've researched it because I'm a bit of a geek. But yeah, I feel like self-actualization is just the realization of one's true nature, which I still don't know. And I think I'm never actually going to be self-actualized. I just think it's a never-ending process. You know, it's like an ideal, but, you know, you got to push towards it, I guess. And, you know, I slip up. I'm not always like, you know, I try. You know, I think that's the most important thing. Like, I give it a go rather than like blaming fate or the universe. Like, I give it a go and maybe I slip up and maybe I'm not perfect. But I think that's all you can really do as a person, you know, is just keep giving it a go. And try learn from people's mistakes and try do things as right as you possibly can. But when you feel like you're informed enough about making a decision and becoming self-actualized, then it's about doing it. I mean, I think that's a big problem in personal development a lot of the time. It's like you could read so many personal development books, you can like learn from so many people, but then it's hard to actually go out there and do it and actually try and make that change. Do you know what I mean? So if you feel that's you, I implore you to go out and start practicing stuff.
Okay, so how do people discern the difference between self-actualization and the things that their ego wants? Because those things can be incredibly confusing for people and hard to kind of make sense of which is which. Right. I know for me personally, I am slowly understanding like which parts of me are are the bits that are a bit unsavory. For one thing, I've noticed that is that there are two voices in my head. There are two voices, and one of them is me, and the other one isn't me. And I try and make it to be the one that's me as much as possible. So I was wondering if you'd had any experiences similar to that, and I was also wondering if you had, do you have any advice for people to try and help them access that in any way?
That's a lot of questions, but it's a lot of good questions. That's a really interesting point. I mean, I have to think about this. That's a good question. I feel like your ego, and like I still got an ego. Like I'm still solving this out, man. Like I don't think I'm fully let go of it. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like I've been through like a lot of hardship, and like not like you could say that's part of your ego. You know, you just say, oh, it's part of your identity. But like I've been through things where like my ego, I put myself in situations which are challenging, and because of that, you have to like burn and alleviate. You have to like learn, okay, this doesn't work. I thought this would work because this is my viewpoint on the world and this is what I believed about myself. And then when I went out there and tried something, it didn't work, and that idea I had of myself crushed. I was like, oh gosh. So I feel like for me, it's like focusing on truth as much as you can, and trying to get as many different perceptions and viewpoints and try to understand, but be learning, you know, always learn. And like, you could say like, then you just become this hyper intellect, you know, you have all these ideas and you're super smart in your head, but then I guess there's something even beyond the intellectual realm, you know, there's like pure being and presence in the moment as much as you can make it. Because I feel like if you just sit there, like if you're listening to this right now, like just sit there and like look at everything around you, but don't judge it, don't talk, just try watch and try really settle into it with your body and your essence and really get into it. I feel like that is like another realm beyond the intellect, and I feel like you need to merge both, because you know you need to live in a world where you can be practical as well. But I feel like, to answer your question, I feel like I'm not most suited to answer this. Like I'd love to get someone on who feels like they are, because that would be super interesting for me and the audience. But I feel like it's just going towards truth as much as you can, have a journey where you have meaning and you could define a purpose for what you want to do, and then just trying to be a better you, and no, catch yourself out when you're lying. Don't say things that make you weak. Like I feel like a lot of the times we have this like monkey in our head which talks on behalf of us, and we come up with all these different things and different ideas for how things are. Like, you know, oh, I bet she thinks this about me, I bet he's doing that right now, but really, is that actual reality? You know, I feel like aligning yourself to as much as the truth and reality as possible is probably the best way to go forward. And then having like a direct, something that's bigger than yourself, I think's an important thing. And that doesn't have to be something miraculous, like starting something huge, or it would just be like being a good dad, being a good mum. It's about them, it's not about me. I feel like when you're put in challenging situations where other people rely on you, I feel like naturally you have to let go of this idea you have of yourself, you know, and just pursue truth and meaning throughout that process.
Okay, so truth is something that is incredibly it's an incredibly subjective thing. There is no real kind of truth in a way, because we each have, like, what is true today may not be true tomorrow, just because of the way I'm feeling or what I'm thinking and everything. And so it's Is there have you ever had experiences where could you tell me about an experience where you've had something that you thought was true that was then sort of, I guess, crushed, and that in turn led you to kind of step out of yourself and reevaluate what sort of happened?
had a few experience. I've had quite a lot of experience. I think I experience that pretty much every day on a micro level. But I'll give you a big example. So I have a clothing business, Mason Grower. Follow me on Instagram. Hit me up. I'll sell you some clothes. But basically, I started the business about 4 years ago, and when I started it, I was about 15, and I wanted to go into like manufacturing. I went into cut and sew. I made like a leather jacket, an overcoat, 2 bomber jackets, jeans. Like I made a lot, and I thought I'm going to be this big deal in fashion. I'm going to be great, right? And I know this is quite materialistic, and this is probably not more on the spiritual element, but I want to give like a quite like objective example, and then maybe I'll give you a bit more of a spiritual example. So yeah, I got all these patterns made. By like a sewing service in London. I was only 15. I was like dealing with like quite a lot of big industry people. It was awesome, great learning experience. I'd have done it again, to be honest. But I sent some clothes off to Pakistan to get manufactured through a friend who gave me a link on WhatsApp, and I gave it over to him, and he basically completely ripped me off. So I lost pretty much my life savings, which my parents saved for me, and they were angry as hell. They were like, "You could have used that to got a car, or go to uni and pay off your tuition fees." And I was like pretty down, but I didn't let it get to me. I knew like I actually started a clothing line after, with jumpers and t-shirts wholesale.